Hey geeks! The Queen of England announced that Prince Charles's wife, Camilla, could be called Queen Consort when Prince Charles becomes king one day. And I'm kind of liking that the Queen is becoming this hip new granny now. But couldn't we have avoided 50 years of the Diana drama and the 86 films that have been made about it if she had given Camilla the nod of approval from the beginning? How does a decision like this go down anyway? Edward, that's the Queen's private secretary. I just finished the latest season of The Crown, and I have decided, I believe, that I have caused enough heartbreak. Camilla's a good sport, isn't she? She can be called the Queen Consort if it makes Charles happy. Let's get started. But before we do, please hit that subscribe button below, click the notification bell, and like this video. I want to catch you up on the latest from the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Last week, the United Nations finally woke up to this mess, so the UN Security Council held a meeting to discuss, and in true UN fashion, it was just pure theater. You, America, you want war to happen. Yeah, we're not the ones pushing the largest mobilization in Europe in decades or cyber attacking everyone. Shh, you are making everyone uncomfortable. You want to talk uncomfortable? Imagine how uncomfortable you would be if you had 100,000 troops sitting on your border. Tia Banotti. At least my leaders know what gazpacho is. I'm beginning to think, though, that my Russian accent sounds like Gru from Despicable Me. By the way, that exchange was not exaggerated. So listen, I know how the UN works, and the system makes no sense, because given that Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, it could veto any punitive resolution against it anyway. The thing I don't get is why the UN Secretary-General Antonio Gutierrez doesn't speak up more, since preventing world wars is precisely why the UN was established. A few weeks ago, he just said, "I'm convinced it will not happen, and I strongly hope to be right." So now there's been a flurry of diplomacy. French President Emmanuel Macron tried to save the day by meeting with Putin in Moscow, which Putin only seemed to mock by placing him at a crazy long table. What did you say?
I said, if you enter 1 centimeter in Ukraine, you will pay.
Yeah, I'm having a good day.
Quel crapule.
Not much came out of those conversations, but it also depends on who you ask.
Oui, I secured a deal with Monsieur Putin. There will be no escalation, there will be no deterioration, there will be no invasion. We're that close to have a superb deal.
Yet, we don't make promises. Sorry, what mean promises? Then President Biden met with German Chancellor Olaf Schultz, and he announced that he will bring an end to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline if Russia invades Ukraine. The German Chancellor was more vague on the pipeline, but he seemed to agree because he said that we would be united and we would act together. The Nord Stream 2 is a 764-mile-long gas pipeline that's being built from Russia to Germany's coast on the Baltic Sea. Russia stands to lose billions of dollars if this pipeline doesn't finish, and if Germany has to go buy gas from elsewhere. And so this was the right message, because Putin needs to understand there's a heavy cost to invasion. The bottom line is that no one is enjoying this more than President Putin. All of us have our panties in a twist. He's watching the UN do nothing. We've never talked more about NATO's expansion, and he's waiting for something to come out of this crisis he manifested. I believe we're going to end up having to address 30 years of repressed feelings about NATO's expansion and find a compromise with Putin to prevent a full-scale war. Hopefully I don't eat my words later. But the concern is, once that happens and once Putin sees that he can use his military to bully leaders into getting something he wants, what could he do next? You want to botch the Olympic Games? Hold them in China. The Olympic Games began last week, and although I'm protesting the fact that they're being held in Beijing, I figured that shouldn't stop me from highlighting how incompetent the Chinese regime and International Olympic Committee are, and how President Putin and President Xi have decided to launch a dictator love affair there. Putin is one of the few leaders who's attending the Games, and so he and Xi met and solidified their love for each other with a 5,000-word statement that expressed support for their expansionist foreign policies, and they promised to engage in trade, especially in oil and gas. So cute. Their enhanced partnership is a little worrisome for the US, though, since it will make efforts to punish or isolate them more difficult. They could team up at the UN and increase trade with each other, and that could help Russia stay afloat if tough sanctions are put in place. The Chinese regime has also taken the opportunity at these games to make it seem like all is fine on the human rights and censorship front. They chose a 20-year-old ethnic Uyghur skier from Xinjiang to light the Olympic cauldron at the opening ceremonies, which many experts view as a move by China to kind of stick it to countries who've criticized their human rights track record. Kind of like they're telling the world that they can do whatever they want when it comes to human rights. Then you also have the continued weird situation surrounding tennis star Peng Shuai. She mysteriously disappeared a few months ago after posting a statement on her social media page about sexual assault she says a former senior Chinese official committed against her. Well, she's at the Olympic Games, but only in very controlled environments. And when she's asked about her story now, she acts like it's not a big deal anymore, which is likely because she's being intimidated by the Chinese regime. What's been especially crazy is how China has handled isolating athletes if they test positive. And either they suck at it or they are deliberately looking to demoralize everyone. If an athlete tests positive, they have to stay in so-called quarantine hotels, but they're apparently unhygienic, they have bad food, no training equipment, and often no internet connection. Some athletes have been taken in the middle of the night to be isolated, and some remain isolated for longer than the normal time frame. To be honest, it's not surprising how the Chinese regime is handling this, but I am surprised at how the International Olympic Committee hasn't. The part that gets me about this whole thing is that even with all the controversy, the International Olympic Committee insisted on holding these games in Beijing. And now they've failed the athletes who have lived their whole lives to compete in them. I asked you all if you thought the Olympics should have been canceled, and 87% of you said yes. If the International Olympic Committee doesn't fix this situation and force China to shape up, they'll lose any credibility that they can handle sporting events in the future. A protest has broken out in Ottawa, Canada, and at the Ambassador Bridge, which connects Canada to Michigan, and it's causing a lot of problems. This protest broke out after Canada mandated truck drivers entering Canada to be fully vaxxed or comply with other requirements. And even though nearly 90% of Canada's truckers are already vaxxed, this small group decided to make a loud statement by parking nearly 500 trucks throughout downtown Ottawa and at this bridge. So businesses have had to close, the trucks are blaring their horns in the streets, and in the middle of the night in residential areas, they're driving their vehicles on sidewalks, peeing on statues, and now somehow it's taken on a weird far-right political angle because some of them are flying American Confederate flags. What? They call themselves the Freedom Convoy, which I find especially ironic since they are impeding on everyone else's freedom with their behavior. But let's talk about the bridge they've blocked, where over 40,000 vehicles pass each day. That includes 8,000 trucks that drive over it, carrying about $323 million of goods every day. 25% of all trade between Canada and the United States goes over that bridge. So not only have they shut this bridge down, but this mess has caused major delays and backups at other entry points, which is now threatening supplies of fresh produce and livestock and will likely cause production disruptions in factories. I think protesting is usually a healthy thing for a democracy. But as a rule, if protests are violent or destructive and they do things like shut businesses and trade down and prevent kids from sleeping, then that's not protesting. That's just misbehaving until you get what you want, like a toddler. Unfortunately, we're seeing a spike in these kind of protests all over the world, where people are violently reacting to pandemic restrictions. Like one recent protest in Belgium, for example, turned so violent that government buildings were destroyed and several people were injured. Hopefully my man Justin Trudeau will get a handle on this situation and put an end to it soon. And hopefully this pandemic will end soon before we all lose our minds. Taliban officials traveled to Oslo to request Norway's help with releasing $10 billion of Afghanistan's assets that are frozen in US and other Western banks. They say that the Afghan people shouldn't suffer because of, quote, political disputes, and that we should just release the funds to help feed the people. Isn't that nice? This comes, by the way, while the Taliban continues to kill former members of the Afghan security forces and torture and harass Afghan people. Since the collapse of Afghanistan, unemployment and food prices have soared. The currency there has plummeted, and banks have set limits on cash withdrawals. But worse than all that is that Afghanistan is on the brink of a major famine. The UN says that 95% of its population doesn't have enough to eat, and that 55% could reach a point of hunger crisis very soon. Half of all children in Afghanistan under the age of 5 are facing acute malnutrition. Now, the Norwegians were hoping to get the Taliban to turn around their human rights abuses in exchange for sending humanitarian aid, but we're not there yet. They continue to abuse and torture their people, pursue extrajudicial killings, and prevent women from working. The Taliban did recently reopen universities where some women have been able to go back, and so that may have been a consequence of these meetings, but we're gonna need to see more than that. If the Taliban genuinely cares about Afghan citizens, then they have to recognize that they're the ones doing this to their own people, and they have to actively change their behavior. And also, Afghan assets can't go to the Taliban. They'll go to organizations that will give aid directly to Afghans in need, since who believes the Taliban's gonna distribute all that money without stealing some for itself? For that reason, the Taliban is on my list this week. One of my favorite dissident artists has launched his first ever NFT protest project that I am crushing on. Badiucao is a Chinese Aussie artist and activist who lives in exile in Australia. He created 5 works of art depicting the Chinese government's oppression, but in the context of the Olympic Games. So the works highlight the repression of the Tibetan people, the Uyghur genocide, dismantling Hong Kong's democracy, China's oppressive surveillance systems, and lack of transparency related to the pandemic. Not only is the art cool, but the whole project is super creative. Those who collect a piece can write their own message of opposition to China's regime onto the blockchain as part of the minting process, which then preserves it as a public record of protest. And 10% of the proceeds from the sale of these NFTs will go to the Art in Protest Residency, which was set up by the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts and the Human Rights Foundation to support dissident artists living under authoritarian regimes or in exile, and whose art is connected to their struggle for democracy and basic human rights. I'm not exactly the most tech savvy, so it took me 3 days to figure out how to get this damn thing, but after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I got my piece and I'm obsessed with it. If you're interested in buying one of these NFTs and supporting this protest project, check out the website below. And if you're new to the NFT world, DM me and I'll share some of my tips. Thanks, geeks. If you liked today's show, then please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell too. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok for more political satire. Finally, if there's anything in particular you want me to cover, reach out to me on social media and I'll obviously give you a shout out. Stay fabulous.